Good evening, I'm Brittany Hobson. 11 jurors found Bradley Barton guilty of manslaughter in the death of Cindy Gladue. The verdict came in shortly after the newscast last Friday night. APTN's Chris Stewart has reactions to the decision.
It only took a day of deliberations before the jury found 52-year-old Bradley Barton guilty of manslaughter. Barton could face up to life in prison for his role in Cindy Gladue's death in 2011. The defense and prosecution spoke outside the courthouse.
To prove lack of consent means to prove that the victim in her own mind didn't want that to happen, and I mean, we didn't have a victim here to tell us that.
Barton's lawyer, Dino Batos, said there was much sentiment towards retrying after his 2015 acquittal of first-degree murder.
The weight of the nation and the judgment of the nation was that they wanted this overturned. So disappointed, not surprised.
This morning, the former Chief Commissioner of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, Marian Buller, released a statement saying, in part, "The jurors who found Mr. Barton guilty show that Canadians are ready for change. So far, Canadian governments have failed to recognize the readiness for change. We are waiting still for them to build new, decolonizing relationships with Indigenous people. It is only with new relationships that Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people will be safe in their own homes and communities." Lisa Weber is a lawyer and the president for the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women. She is the pro bono advisor for Donna McLeod, Cindy Gladue's mother.
Family absolutely relieved to hear that there was a conviction. There's, again, probably no words I can express. They were, everybody was crying for joy, relief that was the actual decision. But I tell you, there's a recognition right up until that very last minute that you just never know.
Weber says she has concerns about the possibility of yet a third trial.
I can say just my own reaction, both as a lawyer, female lawyer, as an Indigenous woman. It was pretty devastating and shocking to hear that Barton was already contemplating an appeal. There's no words for how much trauma that this family and frankly, Indigenous everywhere have gone through as a result of this man's actions.
There was no scheduled date for Barton's sentencing. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
The federal government has not done enough to address the ongoing water crisis in many First Nations across Canada. That's according to a new report from the Auditor General of Canada released this week. The report examined how far federal funding has gone to eliminate long-term boil water advisories since the Liberal government came into power in 2015. And findings suggest the feds were never on track to reach its 2021 goal long before the pandemic hit last year. The Auditor General of Canada says unless significant changes are made in how the federal government works with First Nations to resolve water issues, problems with access to safe drinking water will persist. A new report states Justin Trudeau's government has not provided necessary support to end long-term boil water advisories and address ongoing water issues in communities.
In a country like Canada in 2021, it is hard to believe that there are so many individuals who don't have access to something that many of us take for granted. And hence it is time for Indigenous Services Canada to take some concrete action.
Karen Hogan called the findings disheartening. The report tracks what has been done since 2015, when Trudeau came into power, until late 2020. The Liberals promised to end long-term boil water advisories by March 2021. They have confirmed this will not happen, citing delays due to the pandemic. But the Auditor General found Indigenous Services Canada was not on track to meet this deadline prior to the pandemic. In 2015, there were 160 long-term drinking water advisories. As of November 2020, 100 have been eliminated. However, the report finds 15% of these were resolved due to interim measures.
There are many temporary measures that are put into place, and a temporary measure just pushes the issue a little further down the road. So it is time to find long-term, sustainable solutions for the First Nations communities. While there are some plans in place, or under development, those solutions won't be in place until at least 2025.
The audit found the department's efforts have been constrained by an outdated funding formula for operations and management. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller would not give a time frame when the AG's recommendations would be implemented.
I have a very, very specific goal of ensuring that clean water gets in communities. We have to make sure that it's being done in the right way. And I would put to you that we are close to getting there. We are on a good track.
Ultimately, the audit found a regulatory regime was still not in place 15 years after the AG first recommended it. The report says until this is implemented, First Nations will not have drinking water protections comparable with other communities. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News. When he was named Quebec's anti-racism minister on Wednesday, Benoit Charette said education reform was at the top of his list, and with good timing. By Thursday, a group of Indigenous students from Bishop's University went public with allegations of discrimination and mistreatment on campus. Lindsay Richardson reports.
The 2020 Bishop's University Convocation Address referred to a need for change.
Bishop's is far from reflecting the diversity of Canada in its students, staff, faculty, administrators, and governors.
5 months later, a group of Indigenous students say their attempts to see change through didn't fare well on campus.
There was a lot of eye rolling and there was a lot of negative tones in the way they were responding to our questions.
You know, it's been a battle to try to express our needs as First Nations.
When we try to help, we are looked down upon, we're downgraded.
These women are part of an Indigenous Cultural Alliance at the Sherbrooke-based university, located about 2 hours east of Montreal. With the help of the Centre for Research Action on Race Relations, or CRAR, they made their concerns public, saying an on-campus diversity task force is whitewashed. Indigenous professors are underrepresented. The university's land acknowledgement is insensitive, and their promised $6 million cultural hub for Indigenous students is slowly being co-opted for office space.
We were told that we can't get everything that we want. We've had a lot of comments about how we should be grateful for even getting a space.
Cassie Purley says she was retaliated against for pointing out mistakes in course material.
I had a teacher who was mispronouncing, misspelling a lot of the Indigenous stuff. I sent him an email and trying to help him out, and I was downgraded for it, and I was singled out in class. I was not given homework back. He would purposely fail me and stuff due to this thing. And even when I brought it up to other people's attention, nothing was done.
So they proposed having elders come and speak instead, and were told if it wasn't free, it couldn't happen.
We would love to have so many speakers, but we just don't have the budget for that. And it's not like Bishop's is throwing money to help us get these speakers.
Bishops must do better.
In reaction, Bishop says they're committed to diversity and inclusion and are now recruiting a special advisor to address both. But these students feel a first step is acknowledging that systemic change is a two-way street. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Time now for our first break. Coming up, the unveiling of a new dress is causing a stir with families of MMIWG. Welcome back. A First Nations fashion designer says her collection representing missing and murdered Indigenous women is meant to raise awareness about the issue. But some families say a dress that was recently showcased doesn't depict their loved ones, and they call the design triggering. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
It's a collection meant to represent MMIW, the pattern Indigenous fashion designer Leslie Hampton used when designing these dresses are meant to symbolize each stolen sister and families affected.
We wanted each dot to, the vast majority of dots to show the vast statistics of how many people we've how many Indigenous women we've lost.
She came up with the design 2 years ago, but this week, when this photo of Ashley Cullingbull wearing a dress from the collection was posted to social media, many complimented the dress, but some families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls thought it was in bad taste.
I've been traumatized, re-traumatized. It brings back all the memories.
MMIW advocate Deborah Green has a sister who was murdered in 1982 in Calgary. She calls the dress offensive, sexualized, and says the dots look similar to a blood splatter.
A lot of families that have reached out to me have been triggered, and some of their families passed by blunt force traumas and very violent deaths where that did symbolize blood for them, and they were traumatized by that image. The photos that were taken of Ashley are very provocative, I would say.
Another comment on the post read, "Keep wearing stuff like that, you'll go missing."
I think it sparks the conversation around victim blaming and how putting blame on the individual for maybe based on what they're wearing and what happened to them.
There's no way like this photo that we've done was sexualized.
Cullingbull apologized on Facebook, but says she supports the designer and her campaign.
You know, I have family members and friends that haven't come home. So to see a dress done in a way where it can be seen, you know, in mainstream media and it looks beautiful, but the truth behind it is that it's not. It's scary. The stats, the scary truth that we live in.
Hampton says she didn't grow up with her culture and uses her designs to reconnect with her community and to empower Indigenous people.
The Indigenous fashion community is really my way into learning about my indigeneity and learning about who I am as an individual. So I apologize so much if my work affected anybody in a negative way, and it's really just my exploration into myself and how I can continue to better work and better develop work in the future.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
February is Black History Month, and it's being observed in Iqaluit, which some might not know is a multicultural community. Our Kent Driscoll spent some time with an Iqaluit playwright who is Black, Inuk, and growing more successful by the day.
Miali Koli Sudluvnik is a product of Iqaluit. This is a big week for the playwright. Her contribution to a national project called 21 Black Futures premiered online over the weekend. Koli Sudluvnik is Black and Inuk, and so is the lead character of her play.
I called it Blackberries, and there's a young girl, fictional character, who travels north for a relative's funeral, and while she's up here she has an opportunity to get out on the land and chat with her cousin, who is somebody that's helping her to identify herself through just herself expressing to her cousins.
Only 1% of all Nunavummiut are Black. Over 80% of all Nunavummiut are Inuk. Being both, Koli Sudluvnik faced different challenges than many kids in Nunavut, and she put that into her art.
Draw on some of my own experiences through things that either I've lived or that I've seen, and but Effie is somebody who grew up in the south, whereas I grew up here in Iqaluit. And having grown up here in Iqaluit, there's a lot of assumptions about what it means to be Black in the north, and that possibly I'm from somewhere else. I often get the question of, where are you from, but where are you really from?
She is really, really from Iqaluit, and so is her mother. When Koli Sudluvnik was growing up in Iqaluit in the 80s, her mom treated her just like her other kids, with one exception that will be all too familiar to parents of Black children.
I think the only difference I saw in Miali when she was growing up, and I think one of the hardest times, was combing her hair, because it was curly, and if it was long, I had to be careful that I wasn't hurting her as much. But she probably has stories with that too, and making sure that she wasn't late for school, but otherwise she was another child at home.
Her father, Audley Koli, is from Jamaica, grew up in Toronto, and now lives in Montreal. It isn't hard to tell how proud he is of her.
My daughter, I'm so proud of her to see the person she's developed as, okay? Because I can only give her my view as a black man, as a Jamaican, but with Jamaican background. But her mother does like an amazing work from the Inuit perspective. So even though we might not be together as a couple, my daughter is the benefactor of like two incredible people. Because
Miali's dad says that when he first moved to Iqaluit in 1978, there were only 5 other black people living in Iqaluit. He can still name them all. This was the scene last year at the Black Lives Matter protests held in Iqaluit after the death of George Floyd. And that's a whole lot more than 5 black people out there, side by side with Inuit. Koli Sudlovnik has a unique point of view with a foot in both worlds, and by sharing that through her writing, can help the territory learn and grow. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Indigenous artists are front and center with this year's Governor General Awards. More on that after this quick break. With food security a growing concern in Canada's north, a First Nation in the Yukon has started its own farm so they can be self-sufficient. And as APTN Sarah Connors tells us, that farm is a hit with the community. Here's more on that.
So this coop here is probably produces the most eggs.
Kevin Bain is the manager of the Carcross Tagish First Nation farm. These eggs are just some of the food that's produced here. The 565-acre farm just outside of Carcross produces its own meat.
Hey, Big Mama. Hey, you.
Like these sows and these rabbits. CTFN funds the farm, which cost about $25,000 to operate per year. Bain says almost everything produced here is given away for free.
We give to the daycare, to the school, people on SA, people with disabilities. We try to get some to everyone in some way or another.
The farm is linked to this community garden in Carcross. Here, community members grow vegetables and harvest honey and tobacco. Everything produced at the farm and garden is fresh and organic, which Bain says is a plus for elders.
So we're looking at more having just grain-fed food out here, no chemicals or anything added to it, and everything just to help them more healthy.
Bain says the farm and garden also give the community more food security. In 2012, parts of the Alaska Highway washed out, leaving grocery shelves bare.
All the stores in Whitehorse, there was no produce or anything on any of the shelves. And meanwhile, out here, all the elders and people on SA, stuff like that, they were all getting fresh vegetables every day.
In the farm's kitchen, staff are making rose petal face cream.
Everybody wants the rose petal face cream, and we never have enough.
They also hold weekly lessons for community members to learn how to do things like canned food.
We try to preserve as much food as we can for the elders. Because
Donna Wolf is a chartered herbalist and helps out at the farm. She says many of these traditional medicines were picked by CTFN citizens or grown in the garden.
So we got ready for COVID patients.
Like this balsam tea, which she says can help with COVID symptoms.
It takes the poison out of your body.
Wolf says elders are grateful for the food produced here.
What they like about it, it's organic, not store-bought, grown here. They have no worries about, for example, pork chops, fish, moose steaks, moose burger, moose stew.
Later this year, the farm will buy 300 birds that they'll raise for poultry. There will also be opportunities for First Nations youth.
This year, I want to get youth working out here between 18 and 29. where they can have a permanent position during the summer.
Bain says anyone is welcome to come to the farm so they can learn what it's all about.
Fresh food for the people and, and citizens who want to buy some or anything like that.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Carcross.
The winners of the Governor General's Awards in Visual and Media Art were announced this week, and this year most of the recipients are Indigenous artists. Daryl Stranger has more.
Established in 1999, the Governor General's Awards recognizes those in visual and media arts. There are 8 awards representing excellence in various art forms throughout Canada. 5 Indigenous artists won this year. They are Dempsey Bob, Nunavummiant Germaine Arnuktiok, Bonnie Devine, Cheryl LaRondelle, and Lori Blondeau.
They phoned me one day and said I got it, and that morning I was working in my studio, and I told them, I said, it only took me 50 years, I told her.
Bob is a tall, tan Tlingit artist in BC and has been carving and sculpting for over 50 years. He says his art honors the history of his ancestors.
I realized that our people did some of the greatest sculpture ever done by anyone. And I wanted to honor them and get the recognition for them. Because, if you understand art, our ancestors were great sculptors, great artists.
Each of the 8 award winners received $25,000 and a special medallion made by the Royal Canadian Mint. The National Gallery of Canada also showcases the winners' work. Lori Blondeau is a visual artist who works in performance and photography and says the emergence of Indigenous artists into the mainstream is long overdue.
We've been left out of a lot of history, and a lot of the history is being written by non-Indigenous people. So I think visual artists are the ones that are writing the history for our people. And I think it's very, very important because then, we have so many young, talented Indigenous artists that need to see these examples.
Bob says art and culture go hand in hand.
Culture is what makes us human. It makes us Tlingit. It makes us Tahltan. It makes us Nisga'a. Makes us Cree. That's who we are. And that's what I believe, and that's what I know through the art how important it is. Because art is what shows what the cultural values, the standards, the direction of a culture is.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Congrats to all the winners. That's all your weekend edition of APTN National News. For more Indigenous news, visit us online at aptnnews.ca. We'll see you back here Monday. I'm Brittany Hobson. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend.